So I'll say, good evening, everybody. I'm Veronica Reynolds, Head of Community Relations here at New City Library, and I am so pleased to welcome back Denny Daniel, who has done amazing talks for us before on a variety of subjects, including some viewings of old films. It was all throughout COVID, although Denny also came to our library pre-COVID and brought everything with him. We had like a hands-on experience as well. So really pleased to welcome you back tonight.
All right, so I'm Denny Daniel. I curate and run and founded the Museum of Interesting Things. It's a traveling museum that goes all over the place, like schools, libraries, and shows people their iPhones, their iPads, everything you're using. Didn't pop out of thin air, came from a long line of inventions. I like to call it the missing link factor, all the links in the chain until you get to your iPhone. And we also, besides that, have two other flavors, I like to call it. Besides coming to you guys, we also have a location on Broadway and 8th Street where you can actually come to the city and to the village and actually see the museum, and I put the items in your hands and you get an interactive tour. And once a week I do a speakeasy on Sunday. So if you put your email in the chat, Veronica will forward it over to me and I'll invite you guys to the speakeasy. We show 16mm films there. And the next one is a good one. It's Prohibition Jazz. So we're going to be showing original 16mm films of everyone from Billie Holiday when she was 19 to Louis Armstrong when he was half the weight that he was. So half of Louis Armstrong. And there's literally 52 themes now because I do something different every week. But yeah, if you guys put your emails in the chat, then if you want to get on the Zoom, I'll give you maybe we'll give them free for this for the Prohibition Jazz. What do you say? What do you think, Veronica? We should give them free? Yeah, we should comp them. So anyway, as a courtesy to New City, we'll give you guys the comp for the cool jazz. At any rate, this show is a really special one. She really asked for a really cool one, the Green Energy Show, or the Wind-Up Circus Show. And these are all the fun items that are obviously green energy over the years. And the one that's my favorite that I like to show is this one over here. This one is a Thomas Edison cylinder record player. These are the first record players, and I'm going to lift it up and bring it over to the camera before I play it so that you actually see it. So these are the first record players. And what I love about Zoom is that I can really bring it up close and show the behind of it, which you don't get to see as often. And so the record is up over here. These were invented in 1877. This one is from the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was the portable version of it. That's a small version. But they had larger versions like this one in my brochure that was huge. It stood about this high, believe it or not. This one was called the Gem. And I'm going to play it for you. So those are the first record players. That's Ada Jones you're hearing, A.D.A. Jones. She was kind of the Lady Gaga of the time. Now, I can tell that Veronica is getting very angry at how loud it is because it's a library. And clearly she wants me to lower the volume. Look at how angry she is. So what do you think, guys? How would I lower the volume to that? What do you think? I'll give you a hint. You put a sock in it. Because there is no volume. It's a horn. And how do you lower the volume of a horn? You put a sock in it. We actually had professional librarians look it up, and the term put a sock in it actually comes from the Edison cylinder. That's where it comes from. And the records were this. Originally made out of wax, beeswax. And then the later ones, like this one, were made out of celluloid, which is just a fancy word for plastic. And Cellular, believe it or not, was invented in the mid 1800s. So with these, what you would, and believe it or not, this machine can record as well. People think it's some sort of voodoo getting sound on these things. No, it's not voodoo at all. Basically, this machine and the other large machine I showed you, and all record players as far back as the 1880s could record. So that machine records. You would get a recording, now we'd know it as a needle, but it was actually called a reproducer. And you'd get a blank record, obviously, and you heard Ada Jones, right? And you heard an orchestra behind her, right? Well, Ada Jones and her whole orchestra would have to be in this room, and they would have to sing into that horn. So she would sing, by the light of the silvery moon. And then it kind of works like a sewing machine up and down, as opposed to your flat records, which had a spiral into the groove. And when you scratched it, it used to skip, remember? These actually went up and down as opposed to the spiral. So she would sing, but it's the same way when I talk to you. When I talk to you, my mouth, my tongue makes sound waves that hit your eardrum. What happens when you hit a drum? Makes a noise, right? Well, instead of hitting your eardrum, you could hit tin, or you could hit Plato, not Plato. He was a Greek guy, big, strong Greek guy. You don't want to hit him. Or you could hit wax, beeswax. So I could say something like, hello. When you play it back, hello. You're just moving air the same way my mouth, my tongue moves air. I make lots of noises with my mouth. Ask my mother, she'll tell you. So all those noises you guys are making are just sound waves flying around the room. They could hit your eardrum, or they can hit the back wall. So if I put peanut butter on the back wall, maybe I can play the back wall back. Play the back wall back at you. So if you guys, when you go back to your bedrooms, if you see peanut butter all over your walls, don't say anything you don't want your spouse to know about, or your mom or something, because they're probably spying on you with peanut butter on the walls. No, I'm just kidding. Now you're not going to be able to use peanut butter. You'll have to use jelly, whoever's doing the spy. But yeah, basically it's just sound waves flying around the room when I'm talking to you, and they hit your eardrum, or they can hit the wax, and it goes up and down with those like a sewing machine. Another one of my favorite machines is this one. What do you suppose that is? Now, some of you might say a record player. Some of you might say a music box. Some of you might say a player piano. Maybe you wouldn't say that too much, but actually it's all three. This is called a Regina or a Calliope machine, and they go back hundreds of years. And this one is from the 1880s from Germany. And I'm going to have you guys wind it for me. So everyone put your hand at the screen right there and grab this, everyone, and give it a wind like that. Are you all doing that for me? Excellent. And here we are. We're ready to play it. Isn't that beautiful? All working on my wind. Everything I'm showing you, no electricity. Now, we look at this and we go, my God, that's incredible. If your sister didn't, play guitar, that's the only way you heard music. If your brother played piano, that's how you heard music. Otherwise, you'd hear it on these things. It's before radio. It's before any recorded sound. So pretty much that was the way you heard music, and it came on, believe it or not, metal discs like this. These were the Calliope records. In fact, I have one that even says Calliope right on it, or a Regina. So that one actually says Calliope, Regina on it. And you notice the holes on this. The holes would grab little hooks, and as it turned, those hooks would play the different notes. Each hook was a different note. So there's these little hooks underneath here that would play the notes for you. Now this device, this one is over 100 years old. They go back over 400 years. Inspired something very modern. And Veronica, I'm so sorry to turn your audience on to this extremely modern device that inspired this device inspired this extremely modern device, and now the audience here is going to require the library to buy one of these. I'm so sorry, Veronica, they're going to make you increase your budget and have to buy one of these extremely modern devices that I'm not sure any of you have heard of. This modern device that 400-year-old technology inspired. Have you guys heard of the computer? You know what these are? Punch cards for the computer. 400-year-old technology inspired the computer, the punch card, because notice that the holes on my punch card are pretty much the same as the holes on the Calliope. You think of computers as being software, right? Electronics, software. Think of it as a mechanical device, a computing machine. So originally, computers, like my sister's, ran on punch cards. When my sister went to Columbia University PhD, when she went to Queens College, she had these punch cards, and she would come home with these punch cards, and it would go into the computer, shoo, 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 and it would program the computer almost like a player piano. Same kind of principle. And so each one of these holes represented information. So it might have her name, Connie Levy, and then maybe the classes she took at Queens College or Columbia, and underneath there, maybe her social security number. Wait, cover that. And one day I remember dropping them on the floor, and she was like, "Oh my God, you messed up my program. Think about taking a Charles Dickens novel, cutting the binding, and throwing the pages all over the floor. If they're not numbered, then you don't know which page is which." So, basically they had to be in the correct order. So your pack of cards could be Microsoft Word or your dissertation. But it was a computing machine. It was like, an old-fashioned calculator or something. It was mechanical in a way. Now, of course, computers had electricity to them, but they were basically working like a player piano. This had basically nothing going on. There's no electricity. It was all mechanical technology. And there's an interesting thing here. What do you suppose that looks like? Looks like a saxophone, but it's even more interesting than just that. It's a pleo sax. What is this pleo sax? A pleo sax is a saxophone player piano. Yep. It used paper rolls with holes in it, kind of like the punch card, but on a roll. So you put a roll over here, and then when you blew into the thing, you turn the roll, and the paper with holes in it played the notes for you. How cool is that? A pleo sax, or what I like to call saxophone for dummies. And it was actually made by the company that made player pianos, the QRS company, right here in New York, closer to you guys than it is to me. It was in upstate New York, and they made almost all the player piano rolls that you guys hear about were the QRS company. But they came up with other concepts. They came up with saxophones that you could use without electricity, and it would play the notes for you with the thing, with the paper with holes in it. And they also made a harmonica on the same principle. So you blew into the harmonica, and you had a paper roll, and you blew into it, and it played the harmonica for you. And of course, what was that called? They liked puns. So pleo sax, the harmonica was called the roll monica. Another kind of cool name. I'm going to keep one last item on the music side of this. This is actually a guitar tuner that was donated by one of our fans. He brought an entire box of guitar tuners. No electricity, no nothing. You basically did the notes, and there are the notes there. And it was all acoustical. And that would give you your notes. This one is way out of tune, but basically it is an acoustic tuner. So now I'm going to get to some of the household items that were green energy. And my favorite of the household items is this one, my very first show in Queens. I brought this one there, and I asked the kids, what do you suppose this is? Any idea what that thing would be? It looks like a medieval torture device. It kind of is, but it's a torture device for apples. It's an apple peeler. So you would take your apple and you would put it on these pins here. You would stick your apple onto those pins, and then this thing here is the blade. So the blade would obviously peel the apple. They would go around it. Now, I know that all you guys have one of these at home, but I'll show you why I have the apple peeler 1.2. And this is over 120 years old, this one, by the way. I have the 1.2 because you'll notice that that bar, when it goes around, it gets to this point, and besides getting stuck, it also will pop the apple out when it's done peeling it. So it's the apple peeler 1.2 because I know you guys have to grab the apple with your hands and pull it off the spikes. This one will pop it off. Now, I did my school in Queens, and I showed this to these fourth graders, and one little girl raised her hand, and she said, "There's a problem with your apple peeler." I said, "What? What's wrong with my apple peeler?" And she goes, "Well, when it goes around, it peels the apple, and then it knocks off the apple, but then your apple falls on the floor. You need a little plate under it to catch the apple." I was like, wow, that is a cool girl. That is an inventor waiting to happen, another Edison. I said, "Who is this girl? What's your name?" They told me her name, and they said, "She's kind of like the valedictorian of the school. She's the smart kid." Ironically, we sat at the back. So my next green energy item is, you guys all will go, "Aw." This is a Singer sewing machine from around the 1950s, a cute little one that was kind of a toy, not a toy, for little girls to learn how to sew. And it came with a little booklet on how to sew. And this one was completely not electric. You can use it by winding it. And it really did work. You could sew clothing. My dad was a big shoe designer. And when I showed him this, he goes, "Oh, yeah, that works. That totally would shoes. That would make shoes." I don't know if you'd make shoes with it. Maybe little ones. But isn't that adorable? What's great with this Zoom is that you guys can really see all the different parts. Once again, no electricity. You're doing all the work yourself. So, one of my favorite items, and my helper here's favorite item, Abigail, my wind-up clock. Now that is an alarm clock, right? You guys probably want to borrow this. Veronica, when you have to go to work, you can borrow this one. Yeah, that'll wake you up all right. And once again, no electricity. Now here's a really ironic, hysterical item. I love this thing. So in the 1940s and 50s and the early 60s, obviously General Electric and all the electric companies were trying to get people to electrify their houses, to have electric lighting and electric stoves and electric everything. They wanted to sell this concept of having electricity that goes on for many, many decades. So they would, when you electrified your house, they gave you an award to kind of give you incentive. And they would often give you that award as a gift. So I picked up one of those gifts, and I thought it was really ironic. I don't know if you're going to get the irony here until I show it to you. Now, first of all, there it is. It actually says, "For having an electrified house." What's great about this Zoom is you can totally read it. Okay, now, of course, you've all realized that this is your doorbell, your door knocker. Now, by this point in life, they had electric doorbells. So they're giving you an award for electrifying your house, and it's a door knocker, but it's not electric. It's a regular one, no electricity. So they're saying, "Thank you for getting electricity. Here's something that doesn't require electricity," which I thought was kind of ironic. I was like, what guy thought of this? Later on, somebody, I guess at the corporation, multi-million-dollar corporation, figured out, why are we not giving them electric doorbells so they use our electricity once they electrified their houses? So they made the second version of this is an electric doorbell. But the first versions they made were actually manual, regular door knockers. You gotta love humans. And then another one of my favorite of the household items. Now, all you guys have cell phones, you have computers, and of course you have an address book, right? Your computer goes down. What happens to your address book? You're doomed. You got nothing. You don't call anybody. You're on the road. Your phone dies. You got nothing. I still use my Palm Pilot. And I'm like, oh no, the Palm Pilot's dead. I got to plug it in. You got to have the plug and all this other stuff. I got the solution for you guys. This. looks like a telephone, right? An old-fashioned rotary telephone. It's not. Okay, guys, I'm going to put on my glasses because we want to call Veronica. Okay, Veronica, we're calling you. Get your cell phone ready. Veronica begins with a V. I do everyone under under their first names. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna call Veronica, but I need her phone number. So I want to get into my address book. So I go V. Wait, hold on. I let go. You know what happens when you do that? You have to do it again. And then it opens up right to V. How cool is that? So Veronica, expect a phone call from us. And if you have like E, you go to E, and it opens to E. So this is my address book. How cool is that? It was called Dial a Name, and I got it in the original box as well, because you got to do that. So now let's get on to some of the math items that I have here. The beginning of calculating is the abacus, of course. Now, when you buy abacus, they all look the same. Wood and, you know, a bunch of these circular things. So I wanted to get one for you guys that look more interesting. This is the children's number aid. It was popular in the late 50s and the early 60s. And it's really cute because it's all colorful. Isn't that great? And this is basically a calculator that even in Chinatown and some parts of Queens, in the Asian neighborhoods, there's a lot of people that still use this. I've had a few of them actually donate them to me. And they were like, oh yeah, my dad had a shop and he just passed away. And, you know, I want to give you his calculator. I'm like, that's cool. Your dad was really cool. And this is very simple. All you have to do is know how to count. So hang on a second. I'm going to move these things. I've got another device over here. I'm going to bring it closer so I can see myself on this thing here. It's helping me. So with this thing, all you have to do, the way it works, is count. So when you're doing it, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And when you get to 10, they're all up over here, and you're holding a whole bunch of these, right? That's a lot to hold. Put them down. This counts as 10. So you pick one of them up, and that's your 10. And if you want to do 11, now you're going to count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, until you get to 19. And when you get to 19, you're holding a lot of these up. So you put them all down, and you put up 20. And that's how this works. These are the tens, and these are the singles, the single digits. Now you know how to use an abacus. That goes back thousands of years. So a later version of these calculators that were not, you know, that were not electrified were these. And my mom actually used these. These are the slide calculators that you can have in your pocket. So my mom had one of these in her pocket when she was a kid. She saw this, she was like, oh yeah, I use that thing. And basically it worked by you put your pointer in here at, let's say, the number, 5, and you move this up like that. And then when you added it to you added another one, it would give you your answer up on the top cues over here. And now I showed this to a friend of mine, Norman, who's like one of these aerospace engineers at Cafe Dante in Manhattan, in the Village. And he looked at it, and he spent the whole time we were eating staring at this, trying to figure it out, my aerospace engineer. And he keeps moving. He's like, and I said, Norman, what's wrong? What are you trying to figure out here? And he goes, well, plus is when you move it up. And I can't figure out minus. Can you guys figure out minus if plus is when you move it up? I hope some of you guessed move it down, because Norman couldn't guess that for the entire meal. And I'm like, really? You're an aerospace engineer? It's a wonder the space shuttle doesn't come down on our heads. Yeah, you go down for minus, you go up for plus. It makes sense. What was he thinking? Now, this one is one of my favorite of the calculators. This one here is the Otis calculator. These are slide calculators. They originally from around 1910. Up until around 1971, this was the premier calculator. This was the Rolls-Royce of calculators. And they don't only do addition, subtraction, multiplication. They can do more than that. They can actually do trig. So you would slide this up and down and see the numbers there? that would do your calculations. So there's a dot here, and there's a 0 somewhere in here, and you place it on the 0, and then when you want to do addition, you go up, and subtraction, you go down. So that's how this thing worked. It's amazing. They, in like the 1970s, when the Texas Instrument came out, the electric calculators, the battery-powered ones, they had races between this and a Texas Instrument, a TI calculator. You know who won? You probably guessed it. The guy's doing this. Because if you remember, the TI used to often have 3 sides, and you had to like press it a certain way to do your calculator. So you had to press it this way and that way, so that because you had to get one side, the other side, or the other side to be used for your calculation. And yeah, there was a way to do that, and it was not easy. Well, this guy just went 1, 2, done. So you beat them out pretty quick. So yeah, sometimes it's actually better to go back to some of this green energy stuff, because sometimes it's quicker, and it also gives you an appreciation for how things happen. It gives you appreciation on how things work. Like with recording, you start to realize that it's sound waves hitting your eardrum. So anything that gets hit by those sound waves, if it manages to hit it hard enough and imprint on it, you can play it back. So a lot of these things, player pianos and all that, are useful things to know even for today, because it can possibly be combined with what we're using today. If you combine the two, you may get a better product, a more secure product, a quicker product, a more green energy product, and not have to use electricity for everything. So let's see, where am I at here? Oh, this is one of the holy grail items in the museum. I am absolutely crazy about this. I found it almost by accident. It was one of these cowboy moments when I'm looking around and I go, what? This existed back then? No, it's not possible. So I picked it up to the museum, got it for you guys. It came in, and I read it, and I was like, oh my God, this is real. Have you guys heard of the zip car? The whole concept of the zip car is you can rent the car by the hour. You thought that was invented recently. Everyone's like, wow, what a great idea. Wrong. Goes back 110 years minimum. Here is your zip card from 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. The Pennsylvania Electric Vehicle Company. There it is, the zip card. You could rent these cars by the hour. Okay, are you ready to freak out and go, oh my God, are you ready to go ooh and ah? Wait till you see the cars that you could rent by the hour. Let me get a picture of one of them. You're going to go, oh my God, I would rent that by the hour. Looks like a Ford Model T. How crazy is that? No, it gets better. It gets better. It's not just renting a Ford Model T. You've heard of the Tesla? These guys did it before the Tesla. These cars were electric. Didn't you see? It says the Pennsylvania Electric Vehicle Company. You could rent an electric car that looked like a Ford Model T by the hour 110 years ago. How cool is that? We thought the zip car invented it. Wrong. And if you ever watched Sleeper by Woody Allen, you're going to kick out of this. In the 1970s, maybe some of you remember this. Let me know if you remember it. Put it in the chat. I found out about it. I kind of remember it, but not really. I was young. But they had the city car. Does anyone remember the city car? That was an electric car from like the 70s, and there it is. And doesn't it look like the sleeper car that Woody Allen used in Sleeper? That tiny little car. So I got the original brochures for this car. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, see that in the streets of Manhattan. That's going to work. People would steal it just as a matter of principle. And I got the postcard for it too. So that concept goes way back. Oh, and another thing I got for you guys that's green energy, one of my favorite items, is which they had, of course, the ones for bicycles. They had them for cars, and the Claxton, which was one that had the plunger that goes down, like the Auga horn. Also, no electricity, and probably the coolest thing, I, of course, had to get an interesting one with two horns. Because, I have to do that. And we're going to get on to some of the items that are toys in a moment more, but I wanted to show this one here. My little Snoopy toy, my walking Snoopy. Now, originally, these were invented around the early 1960s, and it was a longer version. It wasn't a Snoopy per se. It was a sniffer dog, and his nose went down also, and he would sniff the ground. I don't know if anyone remembers that one, but I bet you everyone in the audience now is going, I had one of these. I totally had one of these at my parents' house in Forest Hills. So my parents knew I was coming home every day whenever I did this. Whenever I had this walking down the street with this thing behind me in Forest Hills, and it would make that noise, and then she knew I was coming home, no electricity. And so today, so that my mother knows I'm coming home, I installed these same wheels on my Subaru. Isn't that right? You were in my Subaru today, right? Yeah, I have the same wheels making that squeaky noise the whole way down the Long Island Expressway. And we went all the way up on the Mass Pike with this. The cops didn't stop us because they thought we were crazy. No, I'm kidding. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn to say. So the next item I have to show you, Snoopy's walking away. I showed you this earlier on. This is the Edison record that used the same technology. It was a wind-up one, but these are the diamond discs. Now, a dear friend of mine in Pennsylvania picked up one of these, Allison, and she was like, "Oh, I got this cool record, a 78." And I looked at it, I said, "Dude, man, that's not a 78. That is an Edison diamond disc." And the diamond disc used the same technology. You would wind up the record player, no electricity, and there's a spring that you're winding, and when it unwound, it moved the gears, and they had cars that used the same thing. They had cars that had a handle in the front, and you would wind it up, and the needle went up and down like that, but it was 80 RPM. And remember, it went up and down. This is not your normal record. So if you find a record that's this thick, see that thickness? I'm giving everyone this warning that buys these because I don't want you to put this on a regular record player that's electrified because it will cut a groove into it and destroy the record. These records have to have the needle that goes up and down. A diamond disc player, they're very hard to find. I've got like 2 of them, of course, because I run the Museum of Interesting Things. Took forever to get them to work. But you want a record player that plays the needle up and down for these thick diamond disc records. And that's what they were. That's the way they were. Now, I brought you something else that's really cool. A crystal radio. So what is a crystal radio? Crystal radios also don't use electricity. The way this thing worked was, and they used these in the trenches during the big war, believe it or not. Wait a second, a radio in the trench? Before we really had those portable batteries, how do you use that? Now, they didn't use one that looked like this. It was a block of wood and a slab of lead and these wires and everything, and they had to have a wire going out into the distance. So this is a more modern one. They had these in like the 60s and 70s and 80s that you could buy as a kit in like Edmunds Scientific or Lafayette or Electronics or Radio Shack. If you remember Radio Shack, you would get a crystal radio. And kids love these things. I have a friend that actually, my guy that works on my Edison machine builds crystal radios. So how does it work? Basically, and why does it work? How's it getting electricity without a plug or a battery? Well, radio waves actually have a certain amount of power in them. Zap. But not enough to zap you. So you're looking at me right now. How are you seeing me? Radio waves. That signal, your cell phone that you're using. What is your cell phone? It's a radio. We call a cell phone. No, a cell phone is a glorified radio. It's just like those radios you saw in MASH where radar picks up the phone and goes, we need help here, we need supply. Those were radio phones. A cell phone idea concept is still using a radio wave and towers. but it's using a bit of a different concept. The radio wave was a different, putting it simply, it was a different frequency, a different kind of wave. And a good way someone said to me to explain what a cell is like is to make the signal a little stronger. Think of a honeycomb from a bee, and the signals would go through that and be a little bit more secure so it wouldn't drop as much. But at the end of the day, what is your phone? It's a radio wave. So radio waves have a certain amount of electricity, and like I said, zap. They don't zap you, but that electricity is all around us. While I'm standing here, my cell phone works. Why does my cell phone work? Because a radio wave is coming out that window, coming through that window and hitting the cell phone. So there's radio waves all over you that have electricity. So someone figured out how to harness that electricity. So they take the radio wave, you have this crystal, and you have this giant antenna. Often they would, if you were home, they would attach the antenna to like your pipes, so it would get a stronger signal. And then so you'd attract the radio wave to that, and it would go to your crystal radio. And then they had all this stuff here that kind of, increased the power, made it a little bit stronger. And you were using the electricity inherent in a radio wave to power your radio. So that way you didn't need your battery, you didn't need a plug. So army soldiers during trench warfare would build these crystal radios, and then they'd have an antenna coming out, a wire, not an antenna, a wire, just coming out of the trench, and they'd find out what was going on in the war. They could hear the radio and find out the progress of the war and figure out what's going on. They would tune in, AM radio, obviously, using this little tuning thing. So if you haven't heard of a crystal radio, they're really cool. And they make a lot of kits that you can buy on the internet. And like I said, you can power things with it. You can power almost, anything. It's power. So, of course, let me take a look at how we're doing with our time. Pretty darn good. We're doing really, really well. So, of course, it's the wind-up circus. We have to have some items that are like circusy. So I brought you some of my wind-up toys. For my daddy, he was a shoe designer, if you remember me mentioning. I brought my monkeys that you wind up and he shoe shines. So for all of you in the Zoom, if you're not wearing socks or barefoot, lift up your feet, please. Great. I'll shine your shoe for you. There you go. Now you all have either shiny shoes or shiny feet, one or the other. Maybe it'll do your nails. So my next item is, you can't have a wind-up circus show without a monkey with cymbals. Every show has got to have a monkey with cymbals. That is my monkey with cymbals, who's over 50 years old. I'm thinking of doing this really cool show where I have a circus tent, like a little circus tent like this wide, and when you walk in it, it'll have little shelves all over it, and it'll be filled with wind-up monkeys, and when you walk inside the circus tent, they all go off. Yeah, talk about nightmares waiting to happen. So, some more of my cool wind-up circus items. My duck family. Go, duck, duck. There we go. And the kids follow. And they made a lot of these where you didn't have to wind it up. It was a friction toy. So you would go like this on the ground, and the friction would generate some power that would be built up. And when you put it down, it would shoot across. And actually, I went to, Cooper Union, and a guy had developed a bicycle that worked on that, same principle. So as you were riding the bicycle, it was charging a battery, and eventually the bicycle was able to run on electricity. And it was just such a brilliant idea. And it was able to run on itself, even, because it was that friction. It was basically a friction toy bicycle. I was like, that's really cool. That's why they ended up getting into Cooper Union. The kid was smart. And I brought my favorite of the wind-up toys. We did a show with one of the guys from Coney Island who did auctions, and he had all these wind-up toys there. And I said, you know, you're not leaving this room with all these toys when you're done with this show. He said, you're going to add them to the museum? I added all of them to the museum, some of the ones that you'd seen. And this is one that I didn't add, but when I used it, when the girls in the room said, how does it work? I showed it to them and they all went, oh, and then I had to buy it. I'm going to show you what it does, and I'm pretty sure all of you are also going to go, aw. Isn't he cute? Yeah. So after he did this, my little toy did that, and everyone went, aw. My friend said, put it on your tab. I said, how could I not buy that and add it to the museum? Everybody went, aw. So pretty much it's my most famous item actually now. And since you're all using telephones, I want you to use a more green energy telephone. I got my bear that answers the phone. So with his arm here, there would normally be a telephone on the end of that. He would pick up the phone and answer it with his arm. My wind-up bear that answers the phone. Yeah, he's gotten a little beat up over 50 years that he's been answering the phone. He gets a lot of phone calls, so he got beat up in the meantime. And speaking of telephones, I brought you my telephone. What the Sam hell is that? That's not a telephone. Yeah, this is the way I communicate, because you know what this is. I'm going to show you the text on it. It's a pigeon harness. Yep. This is from World War II, and basically it's for reconnaissance, for spying. So you'd put a pigeon in here. And it's actually made pretty well. It's made so that the pigeon's wings fit in here nicely. So it was obviously a fashion designer from FIT who designed this. So you put it like that, you strap them in there, and then you strap the pigeon on you, and you parachute behind enemy lines, and then you would do your reconnaissance, find out how many Germans there were, where they were, all that other stuff. And then you would take your pigeon out, and you'd take a note. You'd write on the note what you saw, how many Germans, whatever, and you put the note on the pigeon's leg, and then you would send the pigeon back. Where are you sending him? 34th Street and 8th Avenue? Where's the pigeon go? You tell him, go 34th Street and 8th, deliver this note. Is that where he goes? No. If he's a homing pigeon, where does a homing pigeon go? He goes home. They don't know where 34th and 8th Street is and 8th Avenue is. They go home. And the way they train them is they would, let's say, I'm the pigeon. I would use you as the example, but we won't. We'll be kind to you. We would put the pigeon over here, and then we would drive the pigeon or take the pigeon all the way over here. And then at 6 p.m. when it's dinner time, they set the pigeon home, and he goes home dinner time to be with the wife and kids and eat dinner. And then next week, they would move him 2 miles away instead of 1 mile, and then set him all back home at dinner time, 6 o'clock, so he can go home to the wife and kids and eat dinner with the wife and kids at 6 o'clock. So the pigeon knew that every day at 6 o'clock, he flies home. He doesn't know there's a note on his leg. So anything that goes home, you can use as a homing pigeon. You could have a homing giraffe. You could have a homing hippopotamus. Anything that goes home. If I tie a note to every one of you, and you go home with it, you know what that makes you? Makes you a homing pigeon. That's basically the concept. And it's a really great, not just green energy concept, but a fantastic method of getting information. The only way for the Germans to know what you're talking about is to kill the pigeon. They see a pigeon flying, they got to shoot him down. And after they shoot him down, they still don't know anything. You got to go find the pigeon and pull the note off its leg and read the note. Go do that in a battlefield. Pigeons are almost the best way. In fact, I've got spy cameras in the museum where there a lot of photographers, when they went to, like, let's say a boxing event where cameras weren't allowed, they would take the film and they would put it, how do you scoop? Let's say you're in Queens and you want to get your pictures to Manhattan. How do you scoop the other reporters? You take the pictures and you put it on the leg of a pigeon. He flies over the East River. He beats out your horse and wagon. Your horse and wagon takes a while. Fly over. Obviously, an airplane is quicker than a car, than a horse, or than walking or a bicycle. They even did races where they took like a 5 gigabyte file and they tied it to a pigeon's leg and flew it over like Long Island to the end of Long Island. And then they tried to download it on the internet. Who do you think beat out the internet? Try to upload and then download a 5 gigabyte file takes forever. The pigeon flies across in 10 minutes. It's actually quicker and more secure. And they used pigeons, obviously, as far back as the Bible, but still in the Korean War, they still use them. We do a whole pigeon show, and I've got the pigeon carriers and everything. My first TED Talk, I had a pigeon parachute. Pigeon parachute. We'll discuss that in a second. But the pigeon thing went all the way up until the Korean War, where people still, I have the booklets on how to train your pigeon. Did you figure out why a pigeon needs a parachute? Nobody in my TED Talk could. Maybe one of you guys did. They parachuted homing pigeons down behind enemy lines. They did this in France and everywhere. And if you go on my webpage, you'll see the carriers and everything. They had this cage, and they put, let's say, 4, 6, or 8 pigeons in a cage, and they parachuted it behind enemy lines as basically a cell phone. So you would take the pigeon and you would put notes and you'd say, where are the Germans? It was kind of reconnaissance. It was a way of getting information from the French when the Germans were taking over France and trying to take over Europe. I was working with Channel 13 recently. We did a shoot, and one of the guys at Channel 13 said, Denny, that's a great story. There's a movie that uses this. If you guys haven't seen this, and maybe the library has a DVD or something of this, if you see the movie The Great Chase with, who was it? Judy Garland, I believe, was in The Great Chase. But if you, or it was Audrey Hepburn. John, look it up. He is already. But I think it was Audrey. But basically, she's the photographer for The Great Race, and my friend at Channel 13 said to me, she's photographing and she wants to scoop the other reporters, but she's on the field with the cars and the race cars and everything. She pulls out a white dove and she takes the pictures out of her camera and she puts the pictures on the dove's leg and she goes, go and be free, and scoop the other reporters. I picked up the film. I found that scene. It's somewhere in the middle of the film. Go check out the film and you'll see her scoop the other reporters. What's my answer?
I think it's Lillian Kitsch.
No.
Maybe 1962.
There was maybe a second version.
Maybe there's a second one. Oh, 75. Yeah. Wait, there's one in 75.
There's one in 75.
Let's say.
And that is either Audrey Hepburn or Natalie Wood.
Oh, look at it.
I think it's Audrey Hepburn. Who knows in the chat? But anyway, she definitely uses a carrier pigeon to get her note across. Now, of course, you can't have a green energy show without a steam engine. This is my Whedon steam engine, one of the most popular companies of steam engines. They started in the late 1800s. They started doing the steam engine thing, and they sold it to kids because clearly kids should be using fire. So basically, you've got water, you've got this thing you light. You light that, you put it there, heats up the water. What happens when you heat water? You get steam. You use that power to move wheels. Believe it or not, right now, I'm a born and raised New Yorker, but I happen to be in Boston, Massachusetts, or Waltham, actually. And they have the Charles River Museum, which ran on water power, but that's not steam power. So they would use, steam power using the steam as energy moving to move the wheels. But you could use, when I teach kids as far down as kindergarten, I teach them about steam engines because what is going on here? You're just pushing stuff. Anything that push stuff that moves, you can use for green energy. So you could use steam, or I could do this. I could just blow you guys across the room, and that's wind energy. Or I could push you, or I could put a horse in front of your car, and the horse could push the car, could pull the car over. Anything that moves. I mentioned to people what you could do with the library is maybe have a bunch of dogs in the back of the library, and then all of them with their tails blowing in the wind, and then you could use the tails of the dog moving as green energy to light the New City Library. You'd be the most green energy library in the world. You'd be on CNN, Channel 2, Channel 7, and then once PETA found out about you, you'd be on CNN and Channel 2 again for, I don't think enslaving dogs would be. Maybe we should just use the dog's tail to warm his coat and compromise. But I don't know about harnessing dog farms in the parking lot would do good. Veronica scratched that. But anything that moves, you can use. You guys can invent the next green energy item. Think of something that moves and use it as a green energy item. Now, we all know about 3D and all that stuff, and there's no electricity involved. You take a picture, you take it with two lenses, one to the right, one taking a picture to the right, one taking a picture to the left, and you get a 3D image. And then you put it in these stereoscopes. You don't need a computer, you don't need anything, and you don't need a YouTube or an encyclopedia. Why? Because that's what this would be. This would be your YouTube. This would be your Google for the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, because you'd learn about New York or the Civil War looking at the 3D images, but notice on the back, it had text. So that was your Googling. So it really was YouTube and Google of the 1800s, or your Encyclopedia Britannica. No electricity. You'd buy a box of 25 or 50 of these, because there weren't free libraries. Like you guys have this luxury of going to a library or books, buying books, or like I said, the internet. Back then, you didn't have all those luxuries. So you'd buy these, and that would be your Google and YouTube of that era. Now, the library and everywhere you've gone probably has a projector, an Epson projector, and you can do projection. But back then, projection was green energy. They used these magic lanterns, one of my favorite devices in the museum. And it goes back hundreds of years before light bulbs. So what's it using for light? An oil lamp. And there is the oil lamp. This one is a children's story from the early 1900s, because clearly children should be playing with oil lamps. So you put in the oil lamp there, and it used a glass slide. I have the original 1930s glass slides from Walt Disney. There it is. And I do a magic lantern show at our speakeasy. So I'll invite you guys to that too, where I have the original booklets you read from, and there's the glass slides. Do you see the Disney slides? I've got Pinocchio, I've got Mickey Mouse, and I've got this one with Donald Duck. And I literally read from these booklets, and I light a match, and I put my glass slide in there, and I project on the wall, and they called them magic lanterns because imagine seeing an image on the wall 200 years ago. People thought it was ghosts. They thought it was spirits. They thought it was magical. And that's why they called these things magic lanterns. But they were actually used as a storytelling device, and we could do a magic lantern show for you guys. Basically, I would just put in my glass slide, project on the wall, and tell the story of Mother Goose or Aesop's Fables or Jack and the Beanstalk. But people thought it was magical, and that's why they called them magic lanterns. And they begin with microscopes, ironically. A long time ago, there was a guy who took a microscope, and he put basically a candle or an oil lamp or some sort of lamp thing inside of the microscope, so that instead of looking in the microscope and getting light to just see the slide, he could point the microscope and project on the wall. Ironically, there was a pandemic there like COVID, and the guy projected bugs on his audience and scared the living daylights out of the audience. So they all ran out of the room and said, "Oh my God, it's the bugs that caused the pandemic." And what do you think they did? They strung him up on the nearest lamppost. They chopped off his head. No, his next shows were all sold out. Everyone thought it was the coolest thing, having the bug projected on them. They'd never seen that before. So he was sold out forever. And he basically invented the magic lantern, which gives you your projector. And it's before electricity. It's just using oil lamps. How cool is that? Later ones, they did electrify them with light bulbs, but the early ones that were, you know, the ones you brought home with, for your kids, those are the ones that were just basically oil lamps. So my next item, and second to last, is one of my favorite, and this one is kind of near and dear to my heart. I lectured at Pixar on the history of animation, and I brought this device, but I didn't have an animation for it. It's from the 1880s. It's called a praxinoscope, and the guys at Pixar, in less than 10 minutes, made the animation for me, custom made, just for you guys to see. In less than 10 minutes, they made this. So take a look. So if you've heard of a zoetrope, this gives you the moving image. This was YouTube. This was television. This was theater, movie theaters, back 140 years ago. These are praxinoscopes made in France. And it's basically an animation. That's the one that Pixar made. That one on the side here. And then you look at it inside the mirrors. And you see the guy flipping around like that. And that's what you're doing with your YouTube. And that's what you're doing right now. When you're looking at me, you're not looking at a moving image. There's no such thing as a moving image. Images don't move. You're looking at stills flash before your face right now. I'm a bunch of still images, and it gives you the illusion of movement. Nothing's moving except me in the room. And even when you look at me, and your brain is taking images of me still. Oh, and another cool photography item. Before flashes, this was your flash. Magnesium flashes, black powder flashes. You put black powder here, no electricity. It made a spark, and then it would spark the black powder, make a flash, and you take a picture using the light from that flash. We look at this and we go, my God, that's barbaric. You're blowing something up to take a picture of your kids. Well, what do you think you're doing with your cell phone? You're using the electricity in your cell phone to make a flash, an explosion kind of in your cell phone. And you remember the old cameras we had with flash bulbs? Well, that's a light bulb that blows up, a flash bulb. You're still blowing things up to take a picture. We think our technology is so modern. No, sound waves hitting your eardrum, your iPad, that's all it is. Sound waves hitting your eardrum. And your YouTube. Your YouTube is a bunch of still images flash before your face. And the flash in your cell phone is an explosion in your cell phone. You're getting a pattern here. There's a method to my madness, and it's not Methodist. So my last item is one of my favorite and holy grail items in the museum. It is the solar space phone. The solar space phone is from the early 1960s, around 1962, give or take. And this thing really did work on solar power. So the sun's rays came down over here, and then he spoke into this, and the sun's rays turned his voice into electrical signal, and that went over to her device there, the receiver, and it converted the electrical signal back into voice, and then she heard it. Guys, this is from 1960s, early 1960s. So he could only talk, she could only listen. Yeah, it's the 1960s. You gotta love it. But if you think the box is cool, and by the way, it's as seen on Newsweek, if you think the box is cool, wait till you see the solar space phone. It's even cooler. How cool is that? Isn't that cool? And let me see, I need some help. John, want to be my helper? My Vanna White? Excellent. So John, grab that. And then I'm gonna be the girl. We're gonna put this over here so you guys see the solar space phone. All right, I'm gonna put these on my ears. Excellent, John. All right, so John, your job is to talk into that, and my job is to listen with this. So go ahead, say, can you hear me now?
Well, I was going to say ET phone home, but can you hear me now?
Oh, I like the ET phone going. He's good. he's you're hired. Okay, so go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Wait, say it again.
Can you hear me now?
Of course I can hear you, John. You're standing right next to me. And by the way, there's no sun in this room, so obviously, why are we doing this? There's no sun in the room. It's night.
It's solar.
It's solar.
Oh, it's a space phone.
Yeah, so we should be doing this in space. So, and the truth is, you have to be within eye shot of the person because the sun's rays would hit this, and then that had to shoot the signal in there, which means this had to see this. But if this sees this, John, can't you just see me? In which case, why do you need this? Why can't we just talk?
Because they're so cool.
I know, exactly. I think kids bought this because it was cool and the most ridiculous thing in the world.
Just like today.
Exactly. So give John a hand. You did a good job. There you go. I met John at NYU when I was a kid. So yeah, the solar space phone, the most useless, coolest item you could ever buy in 1962. And that is my show. Ta-da! Thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed.